Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight remembering Madeleine Albright, the first woman to serve as U.S. Secretary of State, who passed away last month at the age of 84. Her funeral was held this morning at the storied Washington National Cathedral, where our nation's top leaders sat in the front row. President Biden, the Obamas, the Clintons, and their daughter Chelsea, as well as Al Gore. First Lady Jill Biden was not in attendance because of her work at the community college where she teaches, and Vice President Harris remains in isolation following a positive COVID test. But the number of powerful people who gathered today in Washington was a signal of just how important and beloved Secretary Albright was. She not only contributed greatly to our democracy, but she was also an embodiment of the American dream. Her family fled Prague to escape the Nazis when she was just 2 years old. They returned after the war and then had to flee again when communists overthrew the government. Throughout her diplomatic career, she focused on spreading democracy around the world, especially by expanding NATO, which President Biden emphasized in his eulogy. But she knew that democracy was fragile. And towards the end of her life, she warned about the return of the global danger of fascism. Writing in her book, aptly named Fascism, A Warning, that some may view the book and its title as alarmists. Good. We should be awake to the assault on democratic values that has gathered strength in many countries abroad and is dividing America at home. Her mentee, our third female Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton, drove that point home in her eulogy.
During the last phone call, 2 weeks before she died, she talked about the importance of what President Biden is doing to rally the world against Putin's horrific invasion of Ukraine and the urgent work of defending democracy at home and around the world. We must heed the wisdom of her life and the cause of her public service. Stand up to dictators and demagogues. From the battlefields of Ukraine to the halls of our own capital. Defend democracy at home just as vigorously as we do abroad.
That message could not be more relevant today. With our democracy hanging on by its fingertips, we have crossed the Rubicon to the point where issues like racism and anti-Semitism are back in business in the public context in America, as a point of not just social, but also of political contention. A new Politico Morning Consult poll reveals that just 25% of Republicans think that it's a major problem if a political candidate is accused of homophobic remarks. 38% say the same of racist remarks and 47% for anti-Semitism. The numbers are slightly better when it comes to sexual misconduct. 68% of Republicans would have a problem with accusations like that. And domestic violence, 67%. By comparison, more than 70% of Democrats think all of these issues would be a major problem for a candidate. And while that's a sad state of affairs, it does go much further, with Republicans trying to use our own democratic institutions to attack democracy itself. Regarding January 6th, there is new reporting from CNN that shows that Pennsylvania Republican Scott Perry pushed to have the nation's top intelligence official investigate baseless conspiracy theories while working to replace the acting attorney general with an acolyte willing to do Trump's bidding. 5 days after the election, Perry wrote to Chief of Staff Mark Meadows that, quote, DNI needs to ask NSA to immediately seize and begin looking for international comms related to Dominion, referring to Dominion voting machines. NBC News has not independently confirmed these texts. And you cannot forget Marjorie Taylor Greene, who texted that the only way to save the republic would be for Trump to declare martial law, spelled incorrectly, of course. And in their inability to accept that their Trump lost the election, they even endangered members of their own party. I mean, that lynch mob that came to the Capitol to hunt Democratic lawmakers and Speaker Pelosi also infamously chanted, "Hang Mike Pence." And we now know that despite their silence and acquiescence to the first ever attempted American coup, Republican leadership is and has been very much aware of that danger, thanks to new recordings of House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's talking to his whip, Steve Scalise, about Congressman Matt Gaetz's rhetoric right after the insurrection.
This is serious to cut this out. Yeah, I mean, it's potentially illegal what he's doing. Well, he's putting people in jeopardy, and he doesn't need to be doing this. We saw what people would do in the Capitol, and these people came prepared with rope, with everything else.
Joining me now is Charles Blow, New York Times columnist and MSNBC political analyst, and Nancy MacLean, author of Democracy in Chains, The Deep History of the Radical Right's Stealth Plan for America. Thank you both for being here. And Charles, I have to start with you. You know, in a normal world, the things that we heard Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, say on January 6th would be normative, acceptable, and even lauded. I mean, he had these moments of clarity, and he said what any of us would have said. This is unacceptable. These people are going to get someone hurt. The country's too crazy. Well, on what he said specifically about Matt Gaetz, we now know that Steve Scalise, who is the House Minority Whip, met with Congressman Gaetz, apologized to him. He said, "I'm sorry if this has caused you problems," the Louisiana Republican. This is according to Politico. "I haven't been able to get all the details of what these accusations were, but I was being told things, and I know members were getting death threats, and I was just very sensitive to that." And when asked if he would apologize once he had all the information that Gaetz didn't commit a criminal act by attacking Liz Cheney in public following the Capitol siege by then President Donald Trump, supporter Scalise said, "Sure." This is the world in which the supposed leaders apologize to Matt Gaetz, that this might cause him problems, to say nothing of the charges or the accusations against him about teenage girls. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this is par for the course at this point. The moment that McCarthy turned around and went to Mar-a-Lago and kissed the ring and came back and turned his back on all the things he had said in the wake of the January 6th insurrection attempt, you knew that this was their playbook, which was to say that they were going to kowtow to Donald Trump, that they still believed that Donald Trump was the leader of the party and that their path to victory was being attached to Donald Trump. So anyone who is on that side, who is always a Trumpster, a Trump supporter, a Trump bolster, those people are really the people who are in power. The McCarthys of the world, Scalises of the world, just want to have control of Congress. McCarthy wants desperately to be the Speaker of the House. And so he's going to do whatever it takes. And if that means to kowtow to people like Gaetz, that's what they're going to do.
It's a strange world. Let me play very quickly for both of you. This is what President Biden said at Madeleine Albright's eulogy today. Take a listen.
I traveled to Poland and spoke about all that was at stake in our world and for democracy and freedom. But when I mentioned the name of Madeleine Albright, there was a deafening cheer. It was spontaneous. It was real. For her name is still synonymous with America as a force for good in the world.
You know, Nancy, you know, the last of all the great things, she did lots of great things. Madeleine Albright, last thing she did was write a book called On Fascism and warning, Fascism, a Warning, I should say, was the name of her book, warning that fascism, not only abroad, but in the United States, was a real and dangerous threat. So she's now known for that kind of good in the world, as President Biden said. What are one of the great political parties in this country, the once great parties, the Republican Party will now be known for things like this. This is Scott Perry to Mark Meadows on saying they should install their own person at DOJ who would essentially overrule the election and use the power of law to do it. Scott Perry is saying, "Mark, you should call Jeff. I just got off the phone with him, and he explained to me why the principal deputy won't work, especially with the FBI. They view it as not having the authority to enforce what needs to be done." Mark Meadows responds, "I got it. I think I understand. Let me work on the deputy position." This is a congressman of the United States urging the chief of staff to the president of the United States to replace the attorney general so they can steal an election. That now is what the Republican Party is known for. Does it even matter if their leaders apologize to the members who promoted that?
I think it's a little late for apologies. They probably would be insincere, as is pretty clear at this point. But I think it's really important for all Americans to really take note of where we are. We're finding out more and more as the House Select Committee on the January 6th insurrection and attempted coup does its work, that this was obviously a coup attempt. And it's also, if you take a longer look, which I tend to do as a historian, we see that this goes back. The Tea Party faction of Republicans and the big donors who back them have not accepted outcomes when their party has lost since 2008. When President Obama was elected as the first Black president, they, pushed the birther conspiracy. They created the Freedom Caucus. And we now know from the House Select Committee that the Freedom Caucus were the most complicit members in the events of January 6th. And I would say if people want a sense of how serious this is in the kinds of terms that Madeleine Albright laid out that you just quoted, we should look to the Conservative Political Action Committee, which is going to be holding its May meeting in Hungary, Viktor Orban's in Hungary. So as you said at the top of the hour so rightly, Joy, these people are manipulating the tools of democracy to undermine democracy and install autocracy. And that's why they're going to see Viktor Orban, who is an expert in this and who rigged the rules so he could just win a very secure re-election with a comfortable margin to work with in their parliament.